Pack your bags and learn to survive, Dorothy. This is my house now. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood frozen in the living room, surrounded by funeral flowers that hadn't even wilted yet. My son Michael had been in the ground for exactly 3 days, and here was his wife Rebecca, pointing at the front door with eyes as cold as January ice. My hands trembled as I gripped the back of the sofa for support. At 68 years old, after burying my husband George 5 years ago, and now my only child, I thought I'd experienced the worst life could throw at me. I was wrong. "You have 30 minutes," Rebecca continued, her perfectly manicured finger now pointing at her phone. "The locksmith is already on his way." I looked around the house where I'd lived for 40 years. The house where Michael took his first steps, where George and I celebrated our anniversaries, where I'd nursed them both through their final illnesses. "Rebecca, please. 29 minutes now." My name is Dorothy Whitmore, and until that moment, I thought I understood what family meant. I'd been a registered nurse for 35 years before retiring, spending my days caring for others while George built houses across suburban Connecticut. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. More importantly, we were happy. George was my rock, my best friend, the kind of man who still brought me flowers every Friday after 42 years of marriage. When pancreatic cancer took him 5 years ago, I thought my world had ended. But Michael, our son, became my lifeline. A successful attorney at 38, he'd inherited his father's kindness and my stubborn streak. While his colleagues chased partnership tracks in Manhattan, Michael chose family law, helping people navigate their darkest hours. "Mom, you're not alone," he'd promised at George's funeral. "I'll always take care of you." And he had. When I struggled to maintain our family home alone, Michael insisted I move in with him. "It's not charity, Mom. You took care of me for 18 years. Let me return the favor." I sold our house in Fairfield, using the proceeds to pay off Michael's remaining student loans and contribute to his mortgage. It seemed like the perfect solution. I'd have family nearby, and Michael would have help around the house while building his practice. Then Rebecca Patterson entered our lives. She swept into Michael's world like a hurricane 2.5 years ago. A successful real estate agent with a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos, she had my son proposing within 6 months. I wanted to be happy for him. I tried to be happy for him. But mothers know. We always know. The signs were subtle at first. The rehearsal dinner I wasn't invited to. It's just for the wedding party, Dorothy. The honeymoon photos where Michael looked tired rather than blissful. The way Rebecca's laugh never quite reached her eyes when I was in the room. "Mom, I've made sure you'll be okay," Michael had whispered to me just last month, when the cancer that appeared out of nowhere had already stolen 40 pounds from his frame. We were sitting in the hospital garden, watching the October leaves fall. "No matter what happens, you're protected." I'd squeezed his hand, too focused on memorizing his face to pay attention to his words. My brilliant, beautiful boy was dying at 41, and all I could think about was how unfair it was that I had to bury both my men. "Promise me you'll call Harold if you need anything," he'd insisted, pressing a business card into my palm. Harold Brennan, his law school roommate who'd become his closest friend. "Promise me, Mom." "I promise," I'd said, tucking the card into my purse without looking at it. The last time I saw Michael conscious, he'd gripped my hand with surprising strength. "You're the most important person in my life, Mom. Never forget that." Rebecca had been in the hallway, talking on her phone about commission rates. Now, standing in what used to be my home, watching my daughter-in-law's cold efficiency as she typed on her phone, I finally understood what Michael had been trying to tell me. But understanding came too late. My son was gone, and with him, apparently, my place in this world. Rebecca Patterson was 35 years old, beautiful in that sharp, calculated way that made other women feel inadequate. She worked for Coldwell Banker's top producing team and drove a white Mercedes that she washed twice a week. In the beginning, I'd tried to see what Michael saw in her. "She's ambitious, Mom," he'd explained during one of our secret coffee meetings at the park. Yes, secret. Rebecca had made it clear that my dropping by disrupted their routine. The first red flag should have been the wedding. Rebecca had planned every detail with military precision, but somehow forgot to order a corsage for the mother of the groom. "Oh, Dorothy, I'm so sorry," she'd gushed, though her photographer seemed to have no trouble excluding me from most of the formal shots. After they married, the house I'd helped pay for became a fortress. Rebecca installed a smart lock system for security and somehow always forgot to update my code. When I'd arrive for Sunday dinner, I'd stand on the porch like a stranger, waiting for someone to let me in. "Michael's too tired for visitors," became her favorite refrain. This about a man who used to call me twice a day just to chat. When we did manage to see each other, it was always outside the house. Coffee shops, parks, quick lunches between his court appearances. "Is everything okay, sweetheart?" I'd asked him 6 months ago, noticing the strain around his eyes. "Just busy, Mom. You know how it is." But his smile didn't convince me. Neither did the way he kept checking his phone, flinching at certain text notifications. The financial control started subtly. Rebecca convinced Michael to add her to all his accounts, for convenience. Then came the joint credit cards, the consolidated investments, the revised will she'd arranged through her lawyer instead of Harold. "It's standard married couple stuff, Dorothy," she'd explained with that condescending smile when I'd questioned it. "I know your generation did things differently." My generation, as if fiscal responsibility and separate property were quaint relics. The isolation grew worse after Michael's diagnosis. Stage 4 lung cancer in a man who'd never smoked a day in his life. The doctors called it a cruel twist of genetics. Rebecca called it an opportunity to manage things more efficiently. She became his gatekeeper. Hospital visits required her approval. She'd text me visiting hours that always seemed to conflict with his treatments or rest periods. When I did see him, she hovered, checking her watch, sighing dramatically if I stayed too long. "Mom's getting confused," I heard her tell the nurses once. "She doesn't understand how sick he is." Confused? I'd been a nurse longer than she'd been alive. I knew exactly how sick my son was. I also knew he needed his mother, not a warden. The Thanksgiving incident should have been my wake-up call. Rebecca had invited her entire family, parents, siblings, cousins I'd never heard of. When I arrived with my famous pumpkin pie, the one Michael requested every year, she'd looked at me with mock surprise. "Oh, Dorothy, I thought Michael told you we were doing immediate family only this year." I stood there, holding my pie, watching Michael's face crumble from his seat at the dining table. He was too weak to stand, but I saw him mouth, "I'm sorry," before Rebecca ushered me out. "We'll save you some leftovers," she'd promised. They never did. Margaret Chen, my neighbor of 20 years, found me crying in my car that night. "That woman is poison," she'd said, hugging me through the driver's side window. "Anyone can see it. Anyone except my son, apparently. Or maybe he could see it but felt trapped. I'll never know now." The final insult came at Michael's funeral. Rebecca had me seated in the third row behind her book club friends. When I tried to deliver the eulogy I'd written, she'd stepped to the microphone first. "I think we've heard enough speeches," she'd announced. "Michael would want us to remember him quietly." Quietly, my son, who loved stories and laughter, and his mother's voice reading him bedtime stories until he was 12 and too embarrassed to ask anymore. Harold Brennan had caught my arm after the service. "Mrs. Whitmore, we need to talk, but not today. Give it 2 weeks, then call me." He'd pressed his card into my hand, the same one Michael had given me. 2 weeks? I'd asked, confused by the specificity. Trust me, and whatever happens, don't sign anything Rebecca gives you. Now, watching Rebecca stride around my home, Michael's home, our home, like she owned it, I understood Harold's warning. But understanding and preventing were two different things. Time's up, Dorothy. Rebecca's voice cut through my memories. I've been more than patient. This house belongs to me now. You need to go. Saturday afternoon, 3 days after we buried my son. The October sun shone cruelly bright as Rebecca threw open the front door, making sure her voice carried across the manicured lawn where half the neighborhood seemed to be doing yard work. Everyone, come witness this, she called out, her voice syrupy sweet with false concern. Dorothy's finally moving out to somewhere more appropriate for her situation. Mrs. Patterson from across the street looked up from her roses. The Johnsons paused their lawnmower. Even the teenage Martinez kids stopped shooting hoops to stare. I stood in the doorway, clutching my purse, feeling every one of my 68 years. Rebecca, please, can we discuss this inside? There's nothing to discuss. She stepped aside as a van pulled up. Locksmith's here. Time to change these locks properly. My cheeks burned as neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, pretending to check their mail or water plants that didn't need watering. These were people who'd watched Michael grow up, who'd brought casseroles when George died. Now they were witnessing my humiliation like it was afternoon entertainment. Ma'am, I need you to step outside so I can work, the locksmith said, not unkindly. He looked uncomfortable, probably wondering why he was changing locks while someone was still inside. I moved to the porch on unsteady legs. That's when Rebecca began her performance. I tried to be patient, she announced to our audience, dragging my suitcase out the door. But Dorothy's been living off my husband's money long enough. Michael's gone, and it's time she learned to stand on her own 2 feet. The suitcase, the one George bought me for our anniversary trip to Paris, tumbled down the steps. It burst open on the walkway, spilling my clothes across the lawn. My underwear, my medications, the photo album I'd grabbed in my haste. Oops! Rebecca's laugh tinkled like broken glass. So clumsy of me. I dropped to my knees, trying to gather my things while maintaining some shred of dignity. My hands shook as I reached for George's cardigan, the one that still smelled like him even after 5 years. Look at her, Rebecca stage whispered to someone. 68 years old and never learned basic independence. No wonder Michael was so stressed. That stopped me cold. What did you say? You heard me. The constant neediness, the guilt trips, the way you clung to him. No wonder his heart gave out. It was cancer, I said quietly, standing despite my trembling legs. Lung cancer. Stress-induced, the doctor said. Stress from carrying dead weight. The neighbors shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Patterson's face had gone pale. She'd lost her own son 10 years ago and understood the cruelty of those words. Mrs. Whitmore? A voice called out. Officer Johnson from the local precinct had arrived, probably called by Rebecca. Is everything all right here? Officer, perfect timing, Rebecca intercepted. I need this woman removed from my property. She's trespassing. This is my home, I said, finding my voice. I helped pay for it. My name is nowhere on the deed, Rebecca interrupted, producing a folder with theatrical flair. See for yourself, officer. The house is in my name only. Has been for months. Officer Johnson examined the papers, his face apologetic. Ma'am, if your name's not on the deed and the homeowner wants you to leave? I understand, I whispered. She's had 30 minutes to pack, Rebecca added. More than generous, considering. I looked at Officer Johnson, this young man who'd probably helped Michael with parking tickets back in high school. I just need a few more minutes to... She's had enough time, Rebecca cut in. Dorothy, you're embarrassing yourself. Just go. The locksmith finished installing the new deadbolt with a definitive click. The sound echoed across the silent street like a judge's gavel. I bent to collect the rest of my scattered belongings, aware of every eye on me. As I reached for Michael's baby photo, Rebecca's heel came down inches from my fingers. Hurry up. I have a showing at 3. A showing. My son wasn't even cold in the ground, and she was already selling our home. Margaret Chen broke from the crowd, kneeling beside me. Let me help, she whispered, gathering my clothes with gentle hands. As she folded my nightgown, she slipped something into the pocket. For a motel, she murmured. Don't argue. Where will you go? Someone asked as I stood with my hastily repacked suitcase. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Where would I go? My sister in Ohio had made it clear her husband wouldn't welcome a long-term guest. My savings had gone to Michael's medical bills. My Social Security barely covered groceries. That's not my problem, Rebecca said, already turning back to the house. My house. Maybe this will teach her to plan better. As I walked to my 10-year-old Camry, suitcase bumping against my leg, I heard her final words carried on the autumn breeze. Some people just never learn when they're not wanted. My hands shook as I sat in the bank parking lot, trying to make sense of what the teller had just told me. $47.83. That's all that remained in my personal account. I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitmore, she'd said, her young face sympathetic. The joint account was closed yesterday. Mrs. Patterson withdrew everything. But that was my money, too, I'd protested. My Social Security deposits, my pension. I understand, but both names were on the account. Either party can close it without the other's consent. I'd stumbled out of Wells Fargo in a daze. Michael had convinced me to add Rebecca to my accounts for emergencies. Now I understood what kind of emergency she'd been planning for. My phone rang. My sister Linda in Ohio. Dorothy, I've been thinking about your situation, she began without preamble. Tom and I talked and, well, you know how small our condo is. Linda, I just need a few weeks. I can't take you in, Dorothy. I'm sorry. Tom's retired now, and we're on a fixed income. You understand. The line went dead. My baby sister, who I'd helped through nursing school, who'd lived with George and me for 2 years after her divorce, couldn't spare a couch. I drove to the Comfort Inn, the modest motel where George and I had spent our first anniversary when we were too poor for anything fancy. Maybe they'd remember me, offer a discount. That'll be $89 a night, the desk clerk said, plus tax. I handed over my credit card, praying. It came back declined. Try this one, I said, fumbling for my backup card, the one I'd kept for emergencies. I'm sorry, ma'am, this one's not going through either. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number that turned out to be Rebecca. Canceled your credit cards. You're not my responsibility. The clerk's expression shifted from professional to pitying. There's a shelter downtown, he offered quietly. St. Mary's runs it. A shelter. At 68, after a lifetime of hard work, I was being directed to a homeless shelter. St. Mary's was full. Of course it was. Father Thomas, who'd baptized Michael 41 years ago, looked stricken. Dorothy, I had no idea. Try the shelter on Madison. They might have space. The downtown shelter was a different world. The smell hit me first. Unwashed bodies, industrial disinfectant despair. Young men with hollow eyes loitered by the entrance. A woman argued with voices only she could hear. Ma'am, this isn't safe for you, the security guard said gently. Not for a lady your age. Try the Y. They sometimes have emergency beds. But the Y was full, too. And the Salvation Army, and every church I called. By 9 p.m., I was sitting in a McDonald's, nursing a senior coffee I could barely afford. The manager, A boy who looked younger than Michael had been at his high school graduation kept glancing at me nervously. "We close at 11, he finally said. "You can't stay here all night." "I know," I whispered. "I'm sorry." At 10:45, I gathered my things to leave. A young employee, her name tag reading Maria, approached hesitantly. "Ma'am, I'm not supposed to do this, but—" She slipped a paper bag into my hands. "It's just a burger and fries, from the batch we were going to throw out anyway." I nearly cried at her kindness. "Thank you, sweetheart. Do you have somewhere to go?" she asked. I thought of my Camry parked in the darkest corner of the lot. The back seat would have to do. "Yes," I lied. "I'll be fine." The temperature dropped to 43 degrees that first night. I layered every piece of clothing from my suitcase, used my coat as a blanket, and still shivered until dawn. My back screamed from the awkward position. My bladder forced me to find a 24-hour gas station at 3 a.m., where the attendant watched me suspiciously. As the sun rose, I sat up stiffly and caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Hair disheveled, face puffy from crying, clothes wrinkled beyond recognition. I looked like what I'd become, a homeless old woman living in her car. My phone, down to 12% battery, showed 3 missed calls from Rebecca. I listened to her voicemail. "Dorothy, the real estate agent needs to know if you left anything in the garage. If you don't respond by noon, we're throwing it all out. Also, stop telling people I kicked you out. You chose to leave when you couldn't pay rent. Get your story straight." Rent. For the house I'd helped purchase. The house where I'd raised my son. I started the car, grateful it still ran, and drove aimlessly. Where does a 68-year-old woman go when she has nowhere to go? The public library wouldn't open until 10. The mall security would eventually notice me lingering. Even the park benches required permits for extended stays. This was my life now. Counting hours until buildings opened. Rationing my last $47. Sleeping in a car that might break down any moment. And somewhere in a warm house, my house, Rebecca was probably sleeping soundly in Egyptian cotton sheets I'd given Michael for Christmas. You know what? Sitting in that cold car, 68 years old and homeless, I still didn't regret a single sacrifice I'd made for Michael. But I learned something that night that I need every mother, every parent, every caring soul to understand. Love isn't always enough. Sometimes, love needs legal protection. If my story is touching your heart, please subscribe to this channel and share it with every parent you know. Because what happened next, what Michael had done without telling me, proves that our children often see dangers we're too trusting to notice. Hit that notification bell, because you need to hear how a son's love reached beyond the grave to save his mother. And leave a comment if you've ever felt betrayed by family. You're not alone. Let's continue, because that cold morning in my car, everything was about to change. Day 5 of living in my car, and my body was failing me. The sharp pain that started in my lower back had spread up my spine, making every movement agony. I'd run out of blood pressure medication 2 days ago, and the pounding in my head warned me what that meant. At Walmart, I stood in the pharmacy line, knowing what was coming. "That'll be $43 for the generic," the pharmacist said. "I only have 30, I admitted, counting out crumpled bills. "I'm sorry, I can give you a week's supply for that amount?" 7 pills, enough to keep my blood pressure from killing me for 1 more week. What happened after that was anyone's guess. The Walmart parking lot had become my reluctant home, but at 3 a.m., a flashlight beam pierced my window. "Ma'am, you can't sleep here," the security guard said, not unkindly. "Store policy." "Please, just until dawn. I'm sorry. There's been complaints." Complaints. from people sleeping in warm beds who couldn't stand the sight of poverty in their sanitized suburban world. I drove to the only place left, the truck stop on Route 95. The kind of place where nobody asked questions if you kept your head down and didn't cause trouble. Day 10 brought a fever. Just a low-grade thing at first, but combined with the persistent cough I'd developed from the cold nights, I knew I was in trouble. The former nurse in me recognized the early signs of bronchitis, maybe walking pneumonia. That's when I saw her. Rebecca, at Whole Foods, loading organic groceries into her Mercedes. I'd gone in to use the bathroom and maybe sample some crackers from the demo station. My pride was gone, replaced by hollow hunger. She spotted me near the cheese counter and actually laughed. "How's the car life treating you, Dorothy?" She held up a black credit card. Michael's credit card. I recognized the design. "Don't worry, I'm putting his money to good use." I watched her load $200 worth of groceries while I stood there in the same clothes I'd worn for 3 days, trying not to cough. "You know," she added, loud enough for other shoppers to hear, "there are programs for the homeless. Maybe you should look into them." An elderly woman nearby gasped at her cruelty. But Rebecca just smiled and pushed her cart away, leaving me standing there like a broken doll. That night, parked behind an abandoned strip mall, I finally opened Michael's briefcase. I'd grabbed it during those frantic 30 minutes, thinking it might have important papers. Most of it was work files, but tucked in the inside pocket was an envelope marked Mom in his handwriting. Inside, a photo of us at his law school graduation and a yellow sticky note. Password for everything, June 6, 1955. June 6, 1955. George's and my wedding date. The briefcase lock had a combination. With shaking fingers, I tried 060655. It clicked open to reveal a hidden compartment I'd never noticed. Empty except for another business card for Harold Brennan and a single line in Michael's handwriting. "He has everything. Trust him." My phone, charged at the public library earlier, buzzed with an unknown number. "Mrs. Whitmore? This is Harold Brennan, Michael's attorney. I've been trying to reach you for 2 weeks." 2 weeks. Exactly what he'd said at the funeral. "Mr. Brennan, A coughing fit interrupted me. "Are you all right? You sound ill." "I'm fine," I lied, though the fever made me dizzy. "Just a cold." "Mrs. Whitmore, we need to meet immediately. There are matters regarding Michael's estate that require your attention. Can you come to my office tomorrow?" Estate matters. What estate? Rebecca had taken everything. Yes. What time?" 9 a.m. sharp. And Mrs. Whitmore? Michael was very specific about timing. It had to be exactly 2 weeks after his passing. Tomorrow is day 14. I hung up, staring at the card in my hand. What had my son done? What had he known that I didn't? That night, despite the fever and chills, despite sleeping in a car that smelled of old coffee and desperation, I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 weeks. Hope. I spent an hour in the gas station bathroom trying to make myself presentable for Harold Brennan. My reflection mocked me. Hollow cheeks, unwashed hair, clothes wrinkled beyond salvation. But I smoothed my blouse, applied the last of my lipstick, and held my head high. Harold's office occupied the top floor of a restored Victorian in downtown Stamford. His receptionist, an older woman with kind eyes, took one look at me and quietly offered coffee and the powder room key. "Take your time, dear," she whispered. Harold Brennan hadn't changed much since Michael's law school graduation. Silver-haired now, with the same sharp intelligence in his brown eyes that had made him and Michael such formidable study partners. "Mrs. Whitmore," he stood, extending his hand. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Michael was like a brother to me." "Thank you." I sat carefully, trying not to wince at my back pain. I apologized for the cloak and dagger routine, but Michael insisted on very specific instructions. He pulled out a sealed envelope. This codicil to his will could only be opened 14 days after his death. Codicil? An addition, filed separately from his main will, which I believe Rebecca had drawn up by her attorney. His expression darkened. Michael came to me 3 years ago, very concerned about certain developments in his marriage. 3 years ago, right after Rebecca had convinced him to add her to all his accounts. Harold broke the seal and began reading. To my mother, Dorothy Marie Whitmore, I leave the entirety of my holdings in the Whitmore Family Trust, established June 6, 2019. What trust? I interrupted. Michael never mentioned, because he couldn't. Part of the trust's protection was absolute secrecy until activation. Harold smiled grimly. Your son was brilliant, Mrs. Whitmore. He saw what was coming. I don't understand. In 2019, Michael won a medical malpractice case. The settlement was $7 million. Instead of depositing it into his joint accounts, he established this trust with very specific parameters. $7 million. I gripped the chair arms. The trust was designed to be invisible until his death. No statements, no paper trail Rebecca could find. Just a legal entity waiting to protect you. Harold leaned forward. Michael knew Rebecca was isolating you, controlling the finances. He couldn't stop her without destroying his marriage, but he could ensure you'd be protected if anything happened to him. But Rebecca said the house is actually owned by both you and Michael. I have the original deed here. He produced a document. The one Rebecca showed the police was forged. Rather crudely, I might add. My hands shook as I examined the deed. There it was. Dorothy M. Whitmore, clear as day. She forged legal documents? Among other crimes, Michael documented everything, Mrs. Whitmore. Every instance of elder abuse, every financial manipulation, every forged signature. Harold opened a thick folder. He emailed me updates weekly, 20 pages of detailed notes about Rebecca's treatment of you. I thought of Michael meeting me secretly in parks, always checking his phone, always worried. He'd been building a case. He knew he was dying, I whispered. The cancer diagnosis accelerated his timeline. He made sure everything was ironclad. Harold's voice gentled. He loved you very much. His last email to me said, if Rebecca kicks Mom out, prosecute her with everything we have. Tears blurred my vision. My brilliant, protective son had seen it all. What happens now? Now? We fight back. First, let's get you somewhere safe. The trust includes provisions for immediate housing assistance. He made a note. The Marriott has a suite available. The trust will cover it. I can't. You can, and you will. Michael's instructions were very clear. You're to be comfortable and safe while we handle Rebecca. His eyes glinted. Speaking of which, there's more. Michael hired a private investigator 6 months ago. Why? He suspected Rebecca was having an affair. The investigator confirmed it. A man named Brad Phillips. They've been together for over a year, planning what to do with Michael's assets once he died. The room spun slightly. Whether from shock or my untreated fever, I couldn't tell. We have text messages, photos, even recordings of them discussing how to get rid of you once Michael passed. Harold's smile was sharp. Rebecca Patterson is about to learn what happens when you steal from a lawyer who prepared for everything. She has Michael's money. Had. I froze the accounts this morning. Legal provisions kick in when fraud is suspected. He stood. Mrs. Whitmore, your son made sure you'd win this war. All you have to do is let me fight it for you. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt my spine straighten. Michael hadn't abandoned me. Even in death, he was still protecting his mother. The Marriott suite felt surreal after 2 weeks in my car. I stood in the doorway, afraid to touch anything, as if it might disappear like a cruel dream. Harold's assistant had arranged everything, even had groceries delivered and a doctor on call for my bronchitis. First things first, Harold said the next morning, spreading documents across his conference table. The house. You're moving back in today. But Rebecca has been served with an eviction notice. Fraudulent possession of property is a crime. He slid a paper across. This is the real deed. Your name is right there, along with Michael's. She altered a photocopy, not even the original. Margaret Chen was our first witness. She'd been recording everything on her phone since that awful Saturday. I knew something was wrong, she told Harold, showing him the videos. The way she threw Dorothy's belongings on the lawn, laughing about it. I got it all. The footage was damning. Rebecca's cruel words, her theatrical performance, my humiliation, all captured in high definition. Margaret had even recorded Rebecca bragging to someone on the phone later. The old bat actually thought she owned part of the house. Pathetic. This constitutes elder abuse, Harold noted. Public humiliation of a vulnerable adult. 5 other neighbors came forward with statements. The Johnsons had heard Rebecca say she couldn't wait for Michael to die. Mrs. Patterson witnessed her refusing to let me see my son during his final days. Even Officer Johnson, guilt-ridden about that Saturday, offered to testify about Rebecca's behavior. But the real ammunition came from the private investigator. Brad Phillips, the investigator said, sliding photos across the table. Real estate developer. Met Rebecca at a conference 2 years ago. The pictures showed them at restaurants, hotels, even in my house while Michael was at chemotherapy. My house, my kitchen, while my son was dying. Here's where it gets interesting, he continued. I have recordings from the BMW she leased last month. Connecticut's a one-party consent state, and the car's in Michael's name. So, he pressed play on his laptop. Rebecca's voice filled the room. Just 2 more weeks, baby. Once the old lady's out and I sell the house, we're set. 7 figures easy in this market. Brad's response. What about Michael's money? Already transferred most of it. His mother's too stupid to check the accounts. Probably doesn't even know how to use online banking. I closed my eyes, remembering all those times she'd insisted on helping with my finances. Harold's assistant knocked. The forensic accountant is here. The accountant, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia, had traced every penny. In the past 6 months, Rebecca Patterson has transferred $340,000 from various accounts belonging to Michael and Dorothy Whitmore. She also opened credit cards in Dorothy's name, maxing them out and destroying her credit. That's why my cards were declined, I said. She was systematic. Small transfers at first, then larger ones as Michael got sicker. Patricia showed us the spreadsheets. She even cashed out his life insurance policy last month, forging his signature. How much? Harold asked. Another $200,000. Over $500,000. Stolen while my son was dying, and I was too grief-stricken to notice. Here's our strategy, Harold said, his voice taking on the courtroom tone Michael used to admire. We file both civil and criminal charges. Elder abuse, fraud, forgery, theft. The civil case will recover your assets. The criminal case will ensure she faces justice. What about the house? You're moving back in tomorrow. I'll have movers collect your belongings from storage. Yes, she put your things in storage, not the trash. We tracked down the unit. He smiled. Rebecca will be served with eviction papers at her office. Very publicly. I believe you know Judge Coleman? I did. Patricia Coleman had been in my book club for 10 years before her appointment to the bench. She's not going to be sympathetic to someone who threw an elderly widow out of her home 3 days after her son's funeral, Harold said. That night, in my hotel room, I opened Michael's laptop using the password from his note. His email drafts folder contained dozens of unsent letters to me. The last one, dated the day before he died, broke my heart. Mom, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't protect you in person anymore. But I've made sure you'll be okay. Rebecca doesn't know about the trust, the investigator, or Harold's real instructions. Let him handle everything. You spent your whole life taking care of others. Now it's time to let others take care of you. All my love, Michael. P.S. Check the briefcase lock again. I left something else for you. I fumbled for the briefcase, entering the combination with trembling fingers. This time, I felt around more carefully. There, a hidden USB drive taped to the lining. Tomorrow, we would strike back. The USB drive contained everything: videos, documents, recordings. But it was the email folder labeled "For Mom, Insurance" that made Harold whistle low. "Your son was a genius," he said, scrolling through file after file. "He documented everything for 3 years. Look at this." A video filled the screen. Michael, thin and pale but clear-eyed, sitting in what looked like Harold's office. If you're watching this, Mom, it means Rebecca finally showed her true colors. I'm recording this on October 2nd, 2 weeks before I expect to pass. The doctors have given me a month at most. I gripped Harold's desk, hearing my dead son's voice. I need you to know the truth. Rebecca has been planning this for 2 years. I have proof she's been slowly poisoning me with supplements that interfere with my chemotherapy. Not enough to kill me outright. The cancer's doing that, but enough to make sure I die sooner. Dear God, I whispered. I can't prove it in court, not with the time I have left. But I can protect you. Harold has instructions to release everything exactly 14 days after my death. By then, Rebecca will have shown her hand, and you'll have grounds for both criminal and civil action. The video continued for 20 minutes. Michael detailed every instance of abuse, every forged document, every secret Rebecca thought she'd kept. He'd installed hidden cameras in the house. He'd backed up her text messages from their shared cloud account. He'd even recorded her phone calls through the smart home system she'd insisted on installing. "This is admissible?" I asked Harold. "Every bit of it. Connecticut allows recording in your own home, and Michael was meticulous about the legal requirements." Day 16 arrived with Rebecca getting served at her Coldwell Banker office. Harold had hired a process server with a flair for the dramatic. "Rebecca Patterson," the server announced loudly in the busy real estate office. "You're being sued for fraud, elder abuse, and theft. You're also served with an eviction notice. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises." According to witnesses, Rebecca went ballistic. She threw her coffee mug, screamed obscenities, and had to be restrained by her colleagues. Someone filmed it. By evening, the video was all over the local Facebook groups. That night, she appeared at my hotel, pounding on the door. "You conniving old witch!" she screamed. "That money is mine. I earned it putting up with your pathetic son." Hotel security arrived quickly, but not before other guests had opened their doors to watch. More videos, more witnesses to her true nature. "Ma'am, you need to leave," the security guard said. "I'll destroy you," Rebecca shouted as they escorted her out. "You think you've won? My lawyer will bury you." But her lawyer, a smooth-talking man named Derek Walsh, took one look at Harold's evidence and advised Rebecca to consider a plea deal. "She's looking at 10 to 15 years, Harold told me after their meeting. "The forensic evidence is overwhelming." That's when we played our ace card. The investigator had discovered Brad Phillips wasn't just Rebecca's lover. He was her accomplice. They'd done this before, 3 times, in 3 different states. Wealthy men with elderly parents, married quickly, isolated from family, dead within 2 years. "We've contacted authorities in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware," Harold said. "They're reopening those cases." Rebecca's carefully constructed world crumbled in days. Her assets were frozen. Her real estate license was suspended. Brad Phillips disappeared, but not before clearing out their joint account. Poetic justice, Harold called it. The text messages between them were the most damning. Rebecca, the old bag is finally gone, sleeping in her car somewhere. Brad, perfect. How long until you can sell the house? Rebecca, listed it yesterday. Should clear 1.2 million easy. Brad, and Michael's accounts? Rebecca, already transferred 3DK. The idiot never knew what hit him. But my son had known exactly what hit him. He'd just chosen to use his remaining time protecting me instead of fighting her. Judge Coleman issued an emergency order returning the house to me immediately. The locksmith, the same one Rebecca had hired, changed the locks again, this time with me standing in my rightful doorway. I remember you, ma'am, he said quietly. I felt terrible that day. This feels like setting things right. Rebecca's Marriott suite was smaller than mine, but I found no satisfaction in that irony. I just wanted justice for Michael. The criminal charges were filed the next week. Elder abuse, grand theft, fraud, forgery, identity theft, and pending investigation in other states, possible murder charges. She won't see daylight for decades, Harold assured me. But the real twist came when we opened Michael's final safety deposit box. Inside, along with the original deed and other documents, was a handwritten letter. Mom, I know you'll blame yourself for not seeing what Rebecca was. Don't. She fooled me too, until it was too late. But I made sure she couldn't fool the law. Everything I've built, everything I've saved, it's all for you. Live well, be happy, and know that your son loved you more than words can say. Forever your boy, Michael. Beneath the letter was a photo. Michael and me at his law school graduation, both of us laughing at something George had said. Simpler times, better times. But not the end of our story. My dear friends, can you imagine discovering your child protected you even from beyond the grave? That's the power of true love. It plans, it protects, it prevails. If you're still with me on this journey, please hit that like button and share this story with every parent you know. Because what happened in that courtroom next was the kind of justice that makes you believe in karma, in law, and in the unbreakable bond between a mother and her son. Have you ever had someone underestimate you because of your age? Leave a comment below. Let's build a community where we remind each other that gray hair means wisdom, not weakness. Subscribe and ring that bell, because you need to see how Rebecca finally faced the consequences of her actions. Justice was about to be served, and it was going to be absolutely beautiful. Courtroom 3B was packed. Word had spread through our community like wildfire. The widow who'd been thrown out of her home was fighting back. Margaret Chen sat in the front row with a group of neighbors. Former colleagues from my nursing days filled another section. Even Father Thomas had come, his collar a stark reminder of the shelter that had turned me away. Judge Patricia Coleman entered, and I remembered all those book club meetings where we discussed justice in literature. Now she would dispense it in real life. Rebecca entered in an expensive navy suit, her attorney Derek Walsh beside her. She'd styled her hair differently, softer, and wore minimal makeup, the grieving widow act. But her eyes, when they met mine, burned with hatred. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Coleman, the bailiff announced. Harold squeezed my shoulder as we stood. Remember, let me do the talking. Your job is to sit there and let the evidence speak. The State of Connecticut versus Rebecca Patterson. Judge Coleman read. Charges include elder abuse, fraud in excess of $100,000, identity theft, and forgery. How does the defendant plead? Not guilty, Your Honor, Walsh said smoothly. My client has been grieving her husband's death and is appalled by these accusations. Very well. Mr. Brennan, please present your case. Harold stood, and I saw shades of Michael in his confident posture. Your Honor, we will show that Rebecca Patterson systematically abused, defrauded, and humiliated Dorothy Whitmore, culminating in throwing a 68-year-old widow out of her own home 3 days after her son's funeral. Objection! Walsh called. Inflammatory. Overruled. Continue, Mr. Brennan. Harold started with the video evidence. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as Rebecca threw my belongings on the lawn, calling me a burden, telling the neighbors I'd been living off her husband's money long enough. Several people in the gallery gasped. Judge Coleman's face remained impassive, but I saw her jaw tighten. Next came the financial evidence. Patricia, the forensic accountant, detailed every stolen penny. Charts showed the systematic draining of accounts, the forged signatures, the credit cards opened in my name. Mrs. Patterson transferred $340,000 in the 2 weeks following Michael Whitmore's death, Patricia testified. She also cashed out his life insurance policy using a forged signature. Can you prove the signature was forged? Judge Coleman asked. Yes, Your Honor. Patricia displayed the analysis. Michael Whitmore was physically incapable of signing anything in his final week. He was in a morphine coma. Rebecca shifted in her seat. Walsh whispered urgently in her ear. Then Harold played Michael's video testimony. The courtroom fell silent as my son, gaunt but determined, spoke from beyond the grave. I, Michael George Whitmore, being of sound mind, do make this recording on October 2nd, 2024. I want the court to know that my wife, Rebecca Patterson, has systematically isolated my mother from me, stolen from our family accounts, and made plans to remove her from our home upon my death. Rebecca's mask finally slipped. That's fake, she shouted. He was drugged. He didn't know what he was saying. Mrs. Patterson, control yourself, Judge Coleman warned. But Rebecca was unraveling. She turned him against me. That old woman poisoned our marriage. Interesting choice of words, Harold said quietly. Speaking of poison, he introduced evidence of the supplements Rebecca had been giving Michael. While not directly lethal, these supplements are known to interfere with chemotherapy effectiveness. Mrs. Patterson purchased them online using a fake name, but shipped them to her office. The investigator took the stand next, playing the recordings from Rebecca's car. Once the old lady's out and I sell the house, we're set for life, baby. She's too stupid to check the accounts. Michael's finally dying. 2 more weeks, Max. That last one hit the courtroom like a physical blow. Someone behind me whispered, Monster. Brad Phillips had been arrested in Florida and agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. Via video link, he confirmed everything. Rebecca said she'd done this before. Marry sick men with money, wait for them to die, take everything. She called it her retirement plan. And Dorothy Whitmore? The prosecutor asked. Rebecca hated her, said she was the only thing standing between her and the money. The plan was to humiliate her so badly she'd never come back. Judge Coleman had heard enough. Mrs. Patterson, would you like to address the court? Rebecca stood, and for a moment I saw what Michael must have seen first. A beautiful woman with an ugly soul. I loved my husband, she said, tears streaming. His mother was a burden on our marriage. She was clingy, needy, always there. I just wanted her to be independent. Independent? Judge Coleman's voice could have frozen fire. You threw a 68-year-old widow out of her home with $47 to her name. She slept in her car for 2 weeks. She rationed blood pressure medication. Is that your definition of independence? I didn't know she had nowhere to go. The evidence suggests otherwise. Judge Coleman shuffled papers. I have here text messages where you explicitly told someone named Brad that she was, quote, probably sleeping under a bridge where she belongs. The gallery erupted. Judge Coleman gavelled for order. I've heard enough. Rebecca Patterson, you are found guilty on all counts. The court sentences you to 15 years in prison with possibility of parole in 10. You will pay full restitution to Mrs. Whitmore, including damages. Your real estate license is permanently revoked. No! Rebecca screamed. You can't do this. That money is mine. I earned it. As the bailiffs moved to handcuff her, she lunged toward me. You destroyed everything! The bailiffs caught her, but not before she screamed one last thing. He never loved you. He told me so. I stood, finding my voice for the first time in the trial. My son loved me enough to protect me even after death. That's more than you'll ever understand. They dragged her out, still screaming. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Judge Coleman's voice gentled. Mrs. Whitmore, the court apologizes for what you've endured. Go home. Live well. Your son would want that. As we left the courthouse, Harold carrying boxes of evidence we no longer needed, I felt Michael's presence. Justice had been served, but more importantly, truth had prevailed. The key turned smoothly in the lock. My lock, my door, my home. I stepped inside for the first time in a month, and the familiar scent of lemon polish mixed with something else. Rebecca's perfume, sharp and cloying, still lingered. Margaret Chen was right behind me, arms full of groceries. We're going to air this place out, she declared. Open every window. Let the sunshine back in. Within an hour, my neighbors had transformed the house. The Johnsons scrubbed Rebecca's presence from every surface. Mrs. Patterson arranged fresh flowers in every room. Even the Martinez teenagers showed up, hauling Rebecca's abandoned belongings to the garage. We felt so guilty, Mrs. Johnson confided, polishing the kitchen counter. Watching her throw you out like that. We should have done something. You're doing something now, I said, and meant it. Harold had been thorough. Every penny Rebecca stole was returned, plus damages. The judge had ordered her to pay an additional $5,000 for pain and suffering. Combined with Michael's trust, I was financially secure for the rest of my life. But money wasn't what I did with my newfound freedom. The Michael Whitmore Foundation launched 3 months later. Its mission? Providing legal aid to elderly abuse victims and scholarships for law students committed to elder advocacy. Harold agreed to serve on the board. Michael would be so proud, he said at our first meeting. The foundation's first case was Emma Rodriguez, a 72-year-old grandmother whose daughter-in-law had stolen her life savings. We got her money back, and her daughter-in-law a 5-year sentence. You saved my life, Emma sobbed in my arms. I thought I was alone. You're never alone, I told her. Not anymore. Word spread. Soon, we were helping dozens of seniors navigate family financial abuse. I hired a full-time attorney, a young woman named Sarah who reminded me of Michael in his early career, passionate about justice, gentle with clients. Rebecca's story made national news when authorities connected her to 3 other suspicious deaths. She was eventually charged with murder in New Jersey, where her first husband had died under mysterious circumstances. Her total sentence stretched to life without parole. Brad Phillips got 10 years and lost everything when Rebecca's other victims' families sued. Karma, it seemed, had a sense of humor. I turned the guest house into a temporary shelter for elderly abuse victims. The first resident was a man whose son had gambled away his retirement. The second, a woman whose nephew had convinced her to sign over her house. Each had a story of trust betrayed, but also of resilience discovered. On Thanksgiving, 1 year after Rebecca had banished me to the children's table, I hosted dinner for 30 people. Not family by blood, but family by choice. Elderly folks who'd been discarded, dismissed, or deceived, now gathered around my table with heads held high. A year ago, I was sleeping in my car, I told them, raising my glass of apple cider. Today, we're all home. Here's to second chances and the people who help us find them. Father Thomas offered the blessing, adding, "And here's to Dorothy Whitmore, who turned her pain into purpose." I visited Michael's grave every Sunday, updating him on the foundation's work. 12 more families helped this month, I'd tell the headstone. Your legacy lives on, sweetheart. One Sunday, I found fresh flowers already there. The card read, "Thank you for raising such a wonderful son. He saved my grandmother." It was signed, The Rodriguez Family. I published a memoir, When Love Needs Legal Protection, A Mother's Journey from Humiliation to Hope. It became required reading in several elder law programs. The dedication read, "For Michael, who loved me enough to plan for the unthinkable." Speaking engagements followed. I stood before rooms of seniors, adult children, and caregivers, sharing our story. Document everything, I'd tell them. Love fiercely, but protect yourself legally. And never, ever be ashamed to fight for what's yours. Rebecca wrote me once from prison, a rambling letter about forgiveness and second chances. I didn't respond, but I didn't burn it either. I filed it away as evidence that narcissists never truly change. The house felt different now. Warmer, fuller. Michael's photos lined the mantel, but so did pictures of every family we'd helped. His law degree hung next to the foundation's charter. His favorite coffee mug sat next to mine in the cupboard, waiting for Harold's weekly visits to discuss cases. On the second anniversary of Michael's death, I hosted an open house. Over 100 people came, clients we'd helped, volunteers, neighbors who'd become friends. "You've built something beautiful from something terrible," Margaret Chen said, surveying the crowd. "Michael built it," I corrected. "I just carried out his plans." That night, alone in my kitchen, I opened a bottle of wine George had been saving for our 50th anniversary. I poured 2 glasses, setting one at Michael's place. "We did it, baby," I whispered. "We won." The house was mine, the future was mine, and somewhere, I knew, my boys were smiling. If you're listening to this story, chances are you've loved someone deeply. Maybe you're a parent who sacrificed everything for your children. Maybe you're a child watching your parents age. Or maybe you're someone who's been hurt by family, wondering if love is enough to keep you safe. Let me tell you what I learned sleeping in that cold car at 68 years old. Love is powerful, but it needs legal protection. My son Michael understood something I'd been too trusting to see. Family ties don't guarantee kindness. Wedding rings don't ensure loyalty. And sometimes, the people who promise to cherish us are planning our destruction. But here's what else I learned. Real love plans for the worst while hoping for the best. Michael couldn't stop Rebecca from hurting me, but he made sure she couldn't destroy me. Every document he filed, every secret trust he created, every piece of evidence he gathered, that was love in action. To the parents listening, please create your own safeguards. Don't add anyone to your accounts without protection. Keep copies of important documents. Maintain some financial independence, no matter how much you trust your children or their spouses. And if something feels wrong, listen to that instinct. To the adult children, protect your parents like Michael protected me. Have difficult conversations about finances, wills, and wishes. Document everything. And if you see someone isolating or financially abusing your parent, act immediately. Don't wait for the perfect moment. It may never come. To those who've been abused, humiliated, or cast aside, you are not alone. Your age doesn't diminish your worth. Gray hair is a crown of wisdom, not a mark of irrelevance. And it's never too late to fight back, to rebuild, to reclaim your dignity. I was 68 when I became homeless. 68 when I discovered my son's final gift. 69 when I founded the organization that's helped hundreds of families. Now, at 71, I wake up every morning in my own bed, in my own home, with a purpose that honors both my losses and my victories. Rebecca thought she was discarding a useless old woman. Instead, she revealed a warrior who'd been dormant, not defeated. She's in prison now, facing the consequences of underestimating the power of a mother's love and the reach of justice. But this isn't a story about revenge. It's about redemption. It's about discovering that sometimes our children see dangers we're too loving to acknowledge. It's about learning that legal documents can be love letters, that trust funds can be shields, and that even from beyond the grave, true love protects. Michael once told me, "Mom, love isn't just feeling. It's planning, protecting, and providing." He lived those words and died ensuring I'd be safe. So please, love freely, but protect wisely. Trust family, but verify with facts. And remember, whether you're 28 or 88, you deserve respect, security, and justice. Your life has value. Your story matters. And sometimes, the greatest love is the one that plans for the unthinkable. Thank you for listening to my story. Now go write your own, with wisdom, with safeguards, and with hope.